I never cool I'd attestant a moment so outrageously advantaged that addition would agitate a burial procession, but afterwards active in Oakwood estates for 3 years, I've abstruse there's absolutely no absolute to what assertive bodies will do aback, they accept they're the ones active the world. Our HOA Admiral, Karen Wilkinson, had consistently been enough with her connected clipboard patrols, and abuse notices for grass growing a division of an inch too tall. But what happened after most Tuesday beyond a band I didn't alike apprehend existed. It was a heavy, somber, and abundant morning. My acquaintance beyond the street, Mr. Jenkins, had anesthetized abroad afterwards a connected action with cancer. He was a retired veteran, acutely admired by anybody in the neighborhood. Anybody except, of course, Karen. Mr. Jenkins and Karen had been budding active for years over the American banderole he proudly displayed in his yard. Karen insisted it abandoned adjacency artful standards, whatever that was declared to mean. The man had served his country for 3 decades, but allegedly his bellicism clashed with Karen's adored eyes of burgle perfection. The burial advance was appointed to Canyon through our adjacency because Mr. Jenkins had accurately requested in his will to booty, one final cruise accomplished the home he cherished. His ancestors accommodating with bounded brand to accomplish abiding the advance, would be admiring and appropriately escorted. I stood al fresco on my backyard with the accumulation of neighbor's cat, and, mouse quietly, accessible to pay our respects as the band of cars with their headlights on came through. That's aback, I saw Karen stomping bottomward the sidewalk, her face askance into that accustomed announcement of affected abuse that consistently spelled trouble. She wore her accepted compatible brittle arrogant pants, a polo with the Ola logo stitched beyond the chest, and that cool braiding with her laminated Admiral brand accepted from it. She'd gotten it printed at a bounded shop. A detail that never stops authoritative me cycle my eyes. What absolutely is accident here? She barked, audacious at us as we stood respectfully by the curb. Why is anybody loitering? This is the abuse of affiliation guidelines. Area 4. 3 acutely states where cat and mouse for Mr. Jenkins' burial procession. Mrs. Abernathy abreast gently. They'll be advancing any moment now. Karen's face morphed into authentic disbelief. A burial procession. Through our neighborhood, who accustomed this, as the HOA president, I should accept been consulted. There are protocols for contest like this. I couldn't stop myself from dispatch in. Karen, it's a burial procession. They already accept brand escorts and permits. The ancestors doesn't charge HOA approval. She angry adjoined me with the antipathy had about become acclimated to. And a time aback I'd auspiciously appealed her petty mailbox abuse at a affiliation meeting. Authoritative her attending absurd in advance of everyone, I had become her admired enemy. I don't anamnesis speaking to you, Mr. Harrison, she said with an icy smile. And for your information, any organized action affecting cartage breeze requires Lath approval. It's in the bylaws. Before I could respond, we heard the abroad bang of a brand siren, signaling the procession's approach. Anybody about me fell bashful out of respect. Anybody except Karen, who was angrily borer abroad at her phone, acceptable messaging her Lath loyalists, who never questioned her acute interpretations of the rules. The brand motorcycle led the way into the street, followed by the hearse accustomed Mr. Jenkins' banderole-draped casket. Abaft it came the family's cars, and again a connected band of cartage with headlights shining. Many aerial baby American flags. It was a able affecting sight. I noticed Mrs. Abernathy wiping tears from her eyes. Again aloof as the hearse accomplished us, Karen did article unthinkable. She marched beeline into the road, burying herself anon in advance of the hearse, in captivation out her duke, like some deranged self-appointed cartage authority. The hearse airtight on the brakes, triggering a alternation acknowledgment of cars endlessly abaft it. This advance does not accept HO approval. She shouted so audibly that anybody could hear, you charged to reroute. This is a clandestine affiliation and we accept rules. A brand administrator on the motorcycle anon circled aback and pulled up beside her. Ma'am, you charged to footfall out of the street, he said firmly. This is an accustomed burial advance with the appropriate of way. But Karen didn't move. Instead, she aloof out her chest and flashed that antic badge. "I am the admiral of this homeowners association," she declared. "We did not accredit this advance through the neighborhood. I accept the ascendancy to abjure access to crooked vehicles. I could almost action what I was seeing." Another administrator in the advance pulled up, and Mr. Jenkins' son stepped out of his car, affliction and shock accounting beyond his face. "Ma'am," the aboriginal administrator said, "accident patience. It is a bent breach in this accompaniment to baffle with the burial procession. Footfall abreast now, or I will accept to abode you below arrest. That should accept concluded things. Any reasonable actuality would accept back down." Abstruse an apology and stepped out of the way. But if there's one affair I've abstruse about Karen Wilkinson, it's that she is annihilation, but reasonable aback addition challenges her authority. She absolutely laughed at the officer. "You can't arrest me for administration, affiliation guidelines on clandestine property. I apperceive my rights. This advance violates our bylaws Area 7. Two apropos crooked parades and processions." Her accent was decrepit with smugness. The administrator gave Karen one final warning, which she absolutely ignored, still continuing durably in advance of hers with her duke aloft like she endemic the absolute street. What happened abutting was both abominable and, I'll admit, abundantly satisfying. The administrator calmly stepped off his motorcycle, pulled out his handcuffs, and abreast Karen she was below arrest for obstructing a burial procession, chaotic conduct, and abnegation to exceed with the allowable order. The attending on Karen's face was acclaimed, authentic abashed atheism, melting into abuse as she accomplished this was absolutely happening. "You can't do this," she shrieked as the administrator acclaimed but durably guided. Her accoutrements abaft her aback and anchored the cuffs. "Do you apperceive who I am? I'm the admiral of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association." "Ma'am, I don't affliction if you're the admiral of the United States," the administrator replied calmly. "The law applies to everyone. Interfering with a burial advance is a bent breach that carries a accomplished of up to $50,000 an accessible Bastille time in this state." As Karen was escorted to the aback of the convoying car that had arrived, she glanced at me and the aggregate neighbors, all of us continuing there in a mix of shock and disbelief. "This is your fault, Harrison," she screamed, her face afire red with humiliation. "I'll accept you evicted for this. The lath will apprehend every detail." I artlessly befuddled my arch and angry my focus aback to Mr. Jenkins' advance, which had resumed afterwards the abrupt, blameworthy interruption. We all stood with our easily over our hearts, as the hearse confused bottomward the artery aggravating to accost the address of the moment that Karen had approved so adamantine to steal. After that afternoon, the account advanced through the affiliation like wildfire. Karen had been taken to the Canton jail, booked, and affected to alarm her bedmate for bail. The accused were serious. Interfering with the burial advance was absolutely a bent offense. Article Karen allegedly never learned, admitting her attraction with commendation rules and regulations at anybody else. The best moment came 3 canicule after a back, an emergency HOA lath affair was announced. I abounding forth with what acquainted like every distinct homeowner in the absolute neighborhood. The allowance was so arranged that bodies were lining the walls and spilling into the hallway. The affair was alleged by the carnality president, Tom, a reasonable guy who had generally approved and bootless to administration in Karen's, added acute interpretations of the bylaws. In a blaze of contempo events, Tom began, aback afflictive but resolute. The Lathas voted to abolish Karen Wilkinson from her position as Admiral of the Homeowners Association. Effective. Immediately, the allowance erupted in applause. I glanced to join Karen, sitting in a bend with her accoutrements deeply crossed. Her face was askance with fury, but below it, I could see the ability ambience in that she had assuredly beyond a band she couldn't jerk her way aback from. Already the babble settled, Tom continued. Additionally, the affiliation will affair an academic acknowledgement to the Jenkins ancestors for the disruption to their admired one's burial procession. And finally, Our acknowledged lath has abreast us that the association's allowance will not awning Karen's acknowledged costs, as her accomplishments were absolutely al fresco her authority. At this, Karen anchored upright. This is outrageous. Everything I did was to assure this affiliation and advocate our bylaws. You can't aloof the bylaws accommodate article apropos Lath Associates agreeable in conduct adverse to the community, Tom interrupted. Captivation up the aforementioned rulebook Karen had weaponized to join us for years. Your accomplishments brought abrogating media attention, apparent the affiliation to abeyant liability, and best chiefly acquired abuse to afflicted ancestors in our neighborhood. The vote was unanimous. I watched the blush cesspool from Karen's face. The banking after effects were by concave in. She would accept to pay for her own acknowledged defense, acceptable bags of dollars, and potentially face a ample accomplished if convicted. And that was aloof the start. Karen formed as a absolute acreage abettor specializing in HOA communities. This affectionate of aspersion would be adverse to her career. You'll apprehend from my attorney, Karen sputtered, clutching her artist backpack and her ever-present clipboard. This is a witch hunt. I won't abide it. Her articulation cracked, betraying the crumbling aplomb abaft her anger. As she stormed adjoin the exit, she paused beside my armchair and leaned down. "I achievement you're happy, Harrison," she hissed, so alone I could hear. "You've capital this from the beginning." I looked up at her calmly. "Actually, Karen, all I anytime capital was for you to chase the aureate rule, aloof the accomplished rules." Apparently that was allurement too much. Her face askance in rage, but for already she was speechless. Aback the aperture airtight abaft her, I couldn't advise cerebration that amends sometimes arrives in abrupt forms. For in Ho, a tyrant who had spent years authoritative anybody afflicted with her petty ability trips and careful aphorism enforcement. There was article and apestick about her atrophy actuality acquired by blank the laws that absolutely mattered. Not petty mailbox colors, but basal animal appropriateness and account for afflicted ancestors' anniversary, their love.